Great. So welcome everyone to Parents Guide to Staying Sane during the COVID-19 isolation days with Dr. Stein. My name is Mandy Hickman and I'm the Manager of Programs and Community Partnerships with the Psychology Foundation of Canada. And thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate that we're all so busy juggling parenting and work and all of the regular things that life brings us. But on top of that, we are experiencing this pandemic. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy day. So I would like to share with you a little bit about the Psychology Foundation of Canada. So our mission is to see a Canada where every child achieves their optimal mental health. And we do this by nurturing resilience in children through the use of psychological science. We're very grateful to have psychologists across Canada, including Dr. Stein, who contribute to building these programs and building these kinds of resources for us. These are evidence-based programs, and we really focus on helping to nurture resilience through building those kinds of tools and strategies that young people can take throughout their lives. So we have a number of different kinds of programs that span the critical developmental stages. We start at birth with Make the Connection. This is a program where we encourage developing secure attachment between caregivers, parents, and their babies. And we move on through into the school years with Kids Have Stress Too. This is a program where we oftentimes work with educators, childcare professionals, and parents to be able to identify what are the signs and symptoms of stress and how can we really empower children to recognize them and then be able to deal with them. We have a similar program for youth, and this is called Stress Lessons. And we also are offering both of these programs in a digital training format right now that you can check out on our website. And finally, we have Stress Strategies, and this is a problem-solving action plan for adults. So we encourage you to check out stressstrategies.ca. You can go on and input what you might be feeling today, and it'll help to develop an action plan that you can take into your life. And I also wanted to point out that this is Mental Health Awareness Week, and we are absolutely in that space of encouraging strong mental well-being. And we have also developed and curated a few resources on our website that are specific to what's happening right now, our current reality with COVID-19. So I'd encourage you to take a look at our website. We have all kinds of free resources and downloadables that you can share with parents. You can read for yourself, and please let us know if there's something that we're missing. We're always looking for feedback, so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And finally, I wanted to point out that we also have a podcast, and it's called 24/7 The Working Parent. And this is a podcast where actually this month our theme is parent stress. So you know, it seems like that's the overarching theme that we're all experiencing. So please take a look at our website or take a listen to our website. You'll find that on podbean.com. And so now I'd like to take a moment and introduce our speaker, our presenter, Dr. Stein is a clinical psychologist and the founder and executive chair of Multi Health Systems, MHS, a leading assessment and behavior analytics company. He's the former chair of the Psychology Foundation of Canada and the former president of the Ontario Psychological Association, former assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto, and former adjunct course director in the Psychology Department at York University. He teaches at the Directors College of Canada, a university-accredited corporate director education program. Dr. Stein is a fellow of the Canadian Psychological Association. His work has been featured in numerous newspapers, TV shows, radio programs, podcasts, webinars. He's doing a number of webinars this week we were just talking about. He's also been the psychologist for various TV reality shows, including Big Brother Canada, The Amazing Race Canada, Master Chef Canada, The Bachelor Canada, Real Housewives of Toronto, and many others. He shares information on emotional intelligence and hardiness with audiences around the world. So we're very grateful to have you here, Dr. Stein, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Great to be here with you and everybody virtually. It's a bit unfortunate that we have to do this virtually. I really enjoy seeing you all, seeing the audience and sort of interacting with you a lot more. And unfortunately, I can't see the chat with this particular setup, but I will be able to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So use the chat, put in your questions as they come up, and I'll get to them at the end. I've got a lot of material here, and I want to try and squeeze it in the relatively brief time that we have together. So let's get started. As we all know, our world has changed in the last few weeks alone. Who would have thought, you know, and that one event or this kind of an event, a pandemic, can change our lives and change the lives of everyone in the world at such a pace. But this is what we're living with. This is what we're experiencing, and this is what we have to learn to deal with and cope with. And really, what we've known in a variety of situations like this, stressful situations, it's really our ability to respond to changes that determine our success in getting through them. And that's going to be a lot of the focus of what we have in our brief time together, looking at the ways that we can respond, things that we can do, things that are within our control to enable us to deal with the kinds of situations that we're going through right now. So I want to break this into two sections. The first section I refer to as kind of more strategic, or the strategy part, things that we can learn over time to make ourselves more resilient, to build our ability to deal with these stressors, those kinds of areas that we develop and work on in ourselves. And secondly, we'll get into the tactics. We'll get right into things you can do immediately, today, tomorrow, right away, to try and make life a bit easier for you as we go through this pandemic. So in terms of strategic, for the last probably close to 30 years, one of the areas I've been working in is emotional intelligence. We've helped pioneer this area from the early days when it was first identified. And I want to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, because our ability to be emotional intelligent has a lot to do with the way that we deal with situations such as this crisis and other crises. In terms of what we mean by emotional intelligence, since we started this work over 25, 30 years ago, there are more definitions that sort of cropped up, but they all have three things in common. All the various ways of looking at emotional intelligence share three basic things, and I just want to briefly go through those to make sure we're all in the same place when we talk about emotional intelligence. The first one is that ability to identify emotional information in yourself and in others. That's one of the key pivotal aspects of emotional intelligence. People who are high in emotional intelligence are really good at emotional identification. They know how they're feeling, and not only that, they have a good sense of why they're feeling the way they are in any particular situation. As well, they're quite good at identifying other people's emotions. They can get a sense or a good idea when the person they're interacting with may be angry or sad or happy or whatever. So they're good at reading emotions, both of their own and of other people. The second aspect of emotional intelligence is the ability to manage emotions. That includes, again, managing your own emotions. Once you're able to identify what you're feeling, it's a lot easier to manage it, to change it, to increase it, lower it, and have the emotion work in your favor. There are times we may be angry about something, but there may be times that anger is good for you. It motivates you, or it sets an alarm to other people to pay attention to what you're dealing with, as long as it's constructively used. And, you know, when you're upset, when you're sad, when you're anxious, when you're depressed, it's good to be able to know how you can make changes in those emotions. Once you identify them and know yourself well enough, you are able to do that through a variety of techniques. And of course, the ability to manage other people's emotions. Some people say, how can I manage someone else's emotions? Well, I would maybe refer to it more as influence the emotions of others. I'm sure there are people who push your buttons, who know how to get you upset or angry about something. They have that influence over some of your emotions. In the same way, people have the ability to influence someone and make them feel good, right? To comfort someone else. So we have a strong ability, and especially if we're high in these emotional skills, of making other people feel welcome, feel at home, feel comfortable, or making them feel disliked or left out or whatever. So we have a lot of ability in ourselves to influence the emotions of the people around us. And once again, people who score high in emotional intelligence are really good at these abilities. The third area, and one that I've been spending a lot of research time in the last few years, is the ability to focus or use emotions to get things done. So one of the areas I've been working in is with high performance occupational groups. So I'm working with athletes, Olympic athletes, professional athletes, and we're also working with performers, whether they're rock musicians or actors or other kinds of performers, people who have to be on in front of millions of people at specific points in time. They have various techniques they use to put them in the right emotional state to do what they have to do. One of the really outstanding cases I'm sure you're all familiar with in the tennis world is Bianca Andreescu. Her ability as a 19-year-old woman to not only win the Canadian Tennis Championship, but to be in the US Open and make it to the finals, her first time in the US Open, and then go up against Serena Williams, one of the best tennis players in the entire world. And to stand her ground and to win the US Open was an amazing feat for someone not only of 19 years old, but of any age to really go through and do that. So that's a prime example of someone who's able to use emotions. You have a hostile crowd booing you, and yet you can still persist and perform at a superb level. So one of the things I've been able to do is to, for the current book that we have out, interview Bianca's coaches and get some insight into what it takes to be that kind of a champion. And it's not only because we want to learn the techniques or tools that champions use just for the sake of champions, but we think those tools are good for all of us because we all have tasks that we have to do. We make presentations, we have to do projects, we don't want to procrastinate, we want to get things done. So we take some of those tools and techniques and we've put them in our book so that people can really get access to some of these techniques. So that ability to focus your emotional energy to help you get things done is that third sort of dimension of emotional intelligence that we find is really important. Okay, so again, working for close to 30 years in the areas of emotional intelligence, we've learned a lot. Since we began in this area, we've done a lot of research, and other people around the world have done a lot of research. And again, we don't have time to go through all of that, but I'm just going to briefly outline a few things that we've learned about people as a result of this work. And the first thing we know about people who are high in emotional intelligence is they're very self-aware. We probably know a lot of people, many of them become leaders, who see themselves as something much more than they actually are, right? They see themselves as much more capable or competent than they really are. But we find that people who score high in emotional intelligence are people who are really accurate at perceiving themselves. They know their skills, their abilities, they know their weaknesses, they know their challenges. So highly emotional intelligent people can really gauge themselves well in a number of dimensions. We also know that people high in emotional intelligence express themselves well. So you know where they're coming from when you're interacting with them. If you work for a boss, for example, and you hand them your work, a project, do they just sort of look at it and look away from you and you have no idea whether it was good or not? Or do they give you honest feedback where you know that your performance was well done, or there was a few things you could do better, or whatever? So people high in emotional intelligence have this way of expressing themselves, and we sometimes refer to this as authenticity. We know where they're really coming from. We know what they like, what they don't like, and so on. They're very, very expressive. The next thing we know about people with good emotional intelligence is they have very good interpersonal skills. These are the kind of people that you want to be around, the kind of people that you want as friends, you want as colleagues, you want as mentors. Again, you've probably had the situation where you've had a boss, someone you've worked for, and sometimes you cringed every time you went into the room with that person because maybe you didn't know what to expect, or they just didn't have those interpersonal skills. On the other hand, there's people that you're excited about meeting with. You can't wait till your next encounter because you find them nurturing and helpful in terms of what you want to accomplish. So high emotionally intelligent people have very good interpersonal skills. They're also very adaptable, and that's really important in situations that we see today because this is all about adaptation. Our lives today are nothing like what they were a month ago. We've had to change almost everything in our lives. Everyone everywhere is sitting at home in self-isolation, unless you're a frontline person or helping with the food delivery or some of these other areas that we really need people to do. But our whole world has changed in a very brief time. And as we know, some people have adapted well to that change. They've been able to step up to the plate, and other people are having a lot of difficulty adapting to this new change, this new world. And some of the things behind that ease or difficulty are what we hope to touch upon in this presentation. So being adaptable is one of those characteristics that we found in the people with high emotional intelligence. They also tend to be good at making decisions. What we find is that people high in emotional intelligence have the right amount of emotions to make good decisions. In other words, when people are overly emotional, have too much emotion when they have to make a decision, they often make bad decisions. And on the other hand, when people are so logical and rational and don't believe emotion has a place to play in their decisions, we find that they also make poor decisions. Again, I don't want to go into all the details of this, but we have some really good research that we've documented and written about other people's research, where they've looked actually at fMRIs, at the brain waves of people making decisions on things that are not emotional, business decisions. And what they found, studies done at Harvard have found that people who have the right amount of emotion in their decision making make the best decisions. Too little emotion, don't make good decisions. Too much emotion, they don't make good decisions. So knowing how much emotion to expend in these situations can be to your advantage. And this is consistent with what we found looking at decision making. There's also studies on occupational groups such as stockbrokers showing, again, how important it is to use the right amount of emotion when making stock purchases and sales. And then finally, managing stress. This is very relevant in our times today. We have a lot of stress going on with the pandemic. And once again, it's the people with high emotional intelligence that are the ones that we find step up to the challenge. They're the ones that are able to manage the stress going on in their lives, to deal better with the kind of situation that we find ourselves in. And again, there's a number of steps that are important in managing the stresses around us. But the highly emotional intelligent people seem to do a lot better at this. Okay, the model that we use, the EQI model that we use, and the measure that we use for a lot of the research in this area looks like this. It's a wheel with 5 major areas and 15 specific factors. So just again, to summarize, the first factor we measure and look at is our ability to be aware of ourselves. As I mentioned, at an emotional level, to know how we're feeling right now, that I'm excited to be speaking with you, or I'm anxious about the fact that I can't see you, to really be aware of our own emotions. But that's at the micro level. We also can look at the macro level, which we work our way up into self-actualization, which is, how do I feel about myself right now in terms of where I'm at in my world, in my career, in my family, in my life. So self-actualization is that self-awareness at a macro level. So we know some people who just aren't happy in their life. They maybe don't like their job, or they're not happy with their family situation. That gets at this whole area of self-regard. People high in, self-actualization, that ability to develop yourself and to move forward requires a certain amount of understanding where I am right now and what I want to change about myself. The next area we look at, as I touched upon, was how we express ourselves, that authenticity. So people high in emotional intelligence, for example, are high in assertiveness. What that means is when things happen, they have thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. They don't just hold them in and be passive about it, and they don't explode and become overly aggressive about it. They're down the middle, they're assertive. They can express themselves and deal, and this is hard in our day and age today. The world has really changed since we started this work. There was a time early on when we were doing this work that you could be in a different political party and still get along, right? You could be a liberal or a conservative. You even could be a Democrat or Republican and you could still be friends, you could get along, but our world has changed. That people are finding that very difficult today because assertiveness has gone out the window. But that ability to get along with people who have very different beliefs than I might have or you might have, and that's being assertive, to be respectful, but still navigate the relationship that we have through these expression, way we express ourselves. And then we have the interpersonal skills that we talk about, that ability to, for example, have empathy, that ability to see how you're feeling and to understand how you're feeling, that ability to, and again, that's at a micro level, but at the macro level, at the larger level, we talk about social responsibility, that ability to sort of see the world and to see what's needed in the world and to contribute and be helpful in terms of the world situation. Again, all very relevant in terms of COVID-19 and the world we're in today. What is it that we can contribute to this pandemic? The area of decision-making, as I mentioned earlier, the use of emotions, and this involves things like managing your impulse control. Some people are very impulsive. They make quick decisions and sometimes are over emotional when they make those decisions. Or some people are too patient. They wait too long to make those decisions. We find reality testing, the ability to see situations without throwing too much emotion into the situation, allows you to see what's really happening. You know, when people who are high in reality testing, they can gauge a situation really well. If you're, for example, going into a seedy area of town, you can see there's danger signs. You have these antennas that sort of warn you about what's going on. And people who are low in this, of course, they don't pay attention to their environment, and they sometimes get involved in situations that are not helpful. This whole idea of emotions and decision making, if you can just sort of think of it as intuition, right? You've probably had situations where you've had a good sense or a feeling about something being good or bad or approachable or avoidable. And intuition comes from a lot of experience. When we've looked at people in highly trained occupational groups, neurosurgeons, and even highly trained stockbrokers and other groups, we find that they see situations and they engage them really quickly because they've seen them dozens or even hundreds of times before. And that's largely what intuition is. They have a very snapshot abbreviation of what's going on because they're so familiar with the situation, and they have an emotional as well as a rational thinking connection to what's going on and can make those decisions. And finally, the area of stress management, the ability to really cope with challenges. This is a very important aspect of what we see in emotional intelligence. So part of it is that ability to be flexible, to be able to go and change. As we've seen now, we've had to make a lot of changes in our lives. Some people are good with that, and some people are having difficulty coping with that. As well, we have to see and be optimistic, that ability to see that this thing will be over. We're starting to see some signs of that now. So what is it we can look for? How can we prepare for the fact that we will get through this? Hopefully we will see the light of day. Okay, I want to introduce one more concept here, which I think is really important. Some of you may be familiar with the idea of a mindset. This is based on work, again, goes back about 25 years of Carol Dweck, a psychology professor at Stanford University. And again, there's a lot of research behind this. I'll just give you a little insight into how she began this work. Carol was working with young preschoolers in California, 25 or so years ago, and trying to understand how kids deal with frustration. So she gave these little kids puzzles, and she would give them increasingly more and more difficult puzzles until they couldn't do them. And then she would try and gauge the frustration level. How would they deal with the frustration? Would they get angry? And so on and so forth. And as she was doing her research, she noted, it went much as planned, where the kids would get to a certain level and be very frustrated that they couldn't solve the problem. But she also noted, very surprisingly, that there was a group of kids, and maybe it was 10 or 15% of them, that didn't become frustrated. In fact, they became excited. They were challenged. Even though they couldn't solve the problem, they wanted to learn from it. And what really shocked her is some of these kids were so persistent, they kept asking her for more of these puzzles, even though they couldn't necessarily solve them. but they love doing them. They really enjoyed the idea of it. And this led her to this whole idea of a mindset that people seem to have one or the other of a couple different mindsets. The first one, like the kids who were frustrated, she referred to as a fixed mindset. And that refers to the fact that we try and do something and we feel it's too hard and we just give up, right? Or we have this idea in our head that I'm either good at something or I'm not. I'm good at math or I'm not good at it, so I'm going to avoid math. Or there's no way that I can improve my math ability. I'm just not good at it. That goes into what she called a fixed mindset. Once again, I'm just leaping over 25 years of research, but this mindset that she's started with has found to be really important in many aspects of our lives. And I'll give you a few examples soon. But this is the fixed mindset where people kind of feel that their abilities are predetermined and there's only so far they can go. On the other hand, there are people who have this growth mindset, and these people who see failure as an opportunity to grow, as something good, something they can learn from. And challenges, again, are seen as growth opportunities. I'm sure we've all had feedback in our workplace. Well, when it comes to getting feedback, people with a growth mindset love feedback. They can't wait, even if it's negative. They want to get the feedback because they're all about trying to improve. People with fixed mindset don't like feedback. They get defensive about it. They don't want to hear about it. So there's a very distinct difference. People in a growth mindset are always interested in challenges, trying new things, and moving forward in their life. They have a positive attitude about a lot of things. And most of this work that her and her colleagues have done have been along the idea of various abilities, right? The ability to do a number of tasks, a lot of it in school-based subjects and so on. So just summarizing, that growth mindset is that ability to analyze mistakes, you accept challenges, you want to learn new things, and you're inspired by others. People with a growth mindset, if I have a friend who's very successful at doing something, I can be happy about that. People with a fixed mindset are jealous and unhappy about that. They don't want other people to get ahead. So, these are just some of the characteristics they've identified in this. People with fixed mindsets, again, avoid challenges, avoid failure, give up easy. I just want to give you my own example of this because we all have these in various aspects of our lives, right? In various things we do. So when I was younger, when I was in high school and going to college, I loved music. I was very into music. It was a time when the Beatles first came out and we were all picking up instruments, and my instrument of choice happened to be the saxophone. And I loved playing the saxophone. And I played all the way through high school in the bands. I played in University of Toronto marching band, all the way till I finished my bachelor's degree. I was involved in music. And then all of a sudden, at one point, I stopped playing altogether because I had this thought. It just came to me that, that I would never be a great musician. I would never be Stan Getz or Jerry Mulligan or John Coltrane or any of those great saxophone players. In my mind, there's no sense in going on. Why bother playing anymore if I'm never going to be great at it? And I stopped playing. I stopped playing for close to 30 years. I just gave up music. But then one day, in speaking with some friends, we got into the topic, and it just struck me that I stopped playing music so long ago, and it was such an important part of my life, and I missed it. And what happened was I went back and picked up my saxophone and got a teacher and started getting back into it and practicing and learning. I got to the point where I actually joined several bands and started playing again. I also formed a saxophone quartet, and music came back to me. And here's just a sample from my saxophone quartet. And if you recognize that tune, it's from When I'm 64. The message being it's never too late to learn a new skill or get back into an old skill. And what's really important about this is that I've learned that it's not important to be John Coltrane or Stan Getz or any of the great saxophone players. You do things because you enjoy them. That's why you do them. And not only that, but what I've learned over the last several years is my enjoyment spread to others because the bands I play in entertain seniors. We play at Sunnybrook Hospital for veterans. We play at Baycrest. We play at a number of senior centers where we bring joy to many of these people who don't get to experience live music. And, you know, I've had the experience of seeing tears in the eyes of veterans who haven't seen this or heard this music live since the Second World War, since the 40s, since Benny Goodman or some of the other great band leaders came through Toronto playing at the old bandstand down at the CNE, and they had the experience of these bands. So we bring joy to many people just through playing music. And it just teaches you that the growth mindset, by changing your way of thinking about things, it can open up a lot of avenues. It's not, you know, we don't have to close ourselves off to one direction when there's many other directions that we can go when we try a new skill. So the reality is, when we look at mindset, we have a combination of the fixed mindset, the growth mindset, but there are people that are mixed, that are in the middle, which means, you know, I may think that I'm not going to get anywhere in math, but I'm going to get somewhere in music. So, but what we try and do is move people towards more of that growth mindset if we can. Okay, so I want to move now into the area of stress, because that's one of the key topics that we want to deal with. So what's happened is some researchers at Yale and Harvard have taken that concept from Carroll of sort of an ability or academic model of mindset and brought it into the world of stress. And I want to start off by telling you about this really interesting study by Arla Crum and her associates at Harvard that they had done. And again, they've done a whole series of studies, but I just want to give you an example of the kind of work that is led in this direction. So what she did was she went to a large hotel chain and was able to work with the management and people to do a study or an experiment with what we call the maids or the room attendants in the hotel. And they were able to get permission to work with 84 of the people who clean your rooms in these hotels. And they broke them into two groups, a control group and an informed group. And they had 40 in the first group, the control group. And basically they met with them for about a half an hour to 3/4 of an hour. And they talked to them about stress. They told them that, you know, the work you do is really hard. You have to learn to take care of yourself. You've got to be careful you don't overwork. Stress is bad. They were told all the negative aspects of stress. They were told about exercise. They were told how important it is to exercise. And basically they were given this presentation about stress and, you know, try relaxing and doing things to help yourself when you get stressed. Another group of room attendants, 44 of them, were also brought into a room separately, and they were given a very different message. Their message was, you know, the work that you do all day, every day, that work is exercise. You have no idea how much exercise you're getting in the course of a day by moving your equipment, by making the beds, by, you know, cleaning the floors, by cleaning the washrooms. In fact, you do so much exercise. We've measured it, and we found that the exercise you get in the course of a day exceeds the Surgeon General's recommendations for daily activity. Not only that, but you should be proud. You know, very rich people pay a lot of money to join gyms and to work out and have coaches. You don't even need that. The amount of exercise you get in the course of a day is better than what a lot of those people do. And that was it. They were just given those different messaging situations. What happened next is they followed them for 4 weeks. And as you see in these graphs, this measures the change in mindset. So the dark graph going up shows that, in fact, the mindset of the second group, the informed group, actually went up, where they actually believed that they're getting a lot of exercise every day, which they were. And they felt they were getting it both at home and at work. Whereas the control group is either stayed flat or had gone down in terms of the perception at work. They found they were getting even less exercise at work. So the really interesting thing was, when they followed these women up for the 4 weeks, they found some really significant changes in them. For example, the informed group actually lost an average of 2 pounds. They lost weight over the course of that period of time. They also lowered their systolic blood pressure by 10 points. They were found to be significantly healthier as measured by their body fat percentage, their body mass, and their waist-hip ratios. There was actually physiological as well as psychological changes in their health and wellness. all from just being given a different message by changing their mindset in terms of how they perceive the situation. Pretty amazing. But again, this is only one study. They've done many studies in different situations in workplaces and elsewhere, showing the effects of changing mindset can have in our lives. Interestingly, so my colleague and I, who I'll mention, Paul Bartone, recently wrote this book before the pandemic on hardiness. And what's been interesting about this is my co-author's been working in this area, again, for about 25 years, trying to develop this area of hardiness. And what it means when we talk about hardiness has to do with your ability to deal with stressful situations. In other words, it means having a hardiness mindset. And again, over 25 years of research, my colleagues have been able to demonstrate the importance of this hardiness mindset in many different situations. So my co-author, Paul, is a retired colonel from the US Army. He actually was an instructor, taught leadership at West Point. He's a psychologist and has had a very active career in psychology and in the military. Now, Paul and I met a number of years ago, and I was so impressed with his work. A lot of his research, though, in this area is published in scientific journals, in military journals, in places where many people in the public don't really have access to it. And it's so important. And that's why we got together to really bring this message out to the world. Some of the things that they've learned through the research on hardiness that can be useful. And basically, what they found, and the way they started this work 25 or so years ago, when Paul was at the University of Chicago as a graduate student, they were doing research in the workplace on stress. And interestingly, in the middle of their study, where they were studying executives and the way they deal with stress, it was the time of all the mergers and acquisitions in the telecommunications industry. And what happened at that time was there was a large merger that happened in the company they were working with, and many of the people had to be let go. They were laid off from their job. So this was in the middle of their study. So you can imagine that many of the people were very upset and angry and depressed about losing their jobs and what the future would hold. But once again, there was a small number of people, a small percentage, close to 10 or 15, who had a totally different attitude. They said, well, you know, this may be an opportunity. Or they felt, you know what, I've always wanted to do something else. I've always wanted to open a bakery shop or to do whatever. This is my opportunity. I'll take the money that I'm paid out and use it to do something new or have a new career. So again, they noticed that people took to the same situation in very different ways. And for the next 25 years, they were studying what differentiates those people who took it hard, who took it negatively, from those who saw it as an opportunity. And that's where they came up with what they call the 3 C's of hardiness. The first one is called challenge. And that's when we see opportunities as challenges or situations, seeing things as novelty or exciting, as an opportunity to grow, very similar to the mindset we were talking about. The second is control. That has to do with knowing what we can control and what we can't. So in the current pandemic, we can control our behaviors. We can self-isolate. We can keep 6 feet away from other people. We can wear masks. There's a lot of things we can control. We can't control the pandemic. We can't control the virus. So why spend all our time worrying about the virus and the pandemic when we have no control over that? We can control our own reaction to it. So people who are high in control, in other words, managing themselves, score high in hardiness. And commitment. Commitment means being engaged and seeing things as interesting. It means having a purpose in your life. Having a purpose is incredibly important. There's been so much research in this area. In fact, 2 psychologists in Florida did a recent review on tactics that are helpful in depression. And they found one of the best tactics in depression that help people was to have somebody sit down for half an hour with a piece of paper and pen and write down their purpose in life and how they plan to get there. And that had a long-lasting effect on people's ability to manage their depressive feelings. So purpose is hugely important. The other area that was found to be really important is gratitude, being grateful for what we have, being thankful. And again, we document a lot of this research in our book. Okay, so what does this lead to? This leads to a framework for approaching the world. So we all start off with our very core beliefs and values, things we hold dear to us, things that we strongly believe in. And then we operate from our mindset, how we see the world, that we're able to grow and do new things, that we can manage stress, that we're in control, that we have commitment. And then on top of that, we use our emotional skills to interact with the world, to manage our own emotions. Then over that, we have our technical skills. We may be an accountant, we may be a carpenter, we may be a nurse, we could be any number of things where our technical skills and competencies come into play. And that influences the way we impact or perform in the world. So aligning these areas really strengthens us and our ability to work, to influence the world around us. Okay, let's get down to the specifics. We're going to move into the tactics. So what can we do? How can we look after ourselves during a situation that we're in now, such as a pandemic? There's many things we can do. The first thing I just want to point out, though, that we've learned about emotions is that our emotions are contagious. So we have to be careful. We have to watch our leaders. When we see our leaders, whether that's the politicians or the public health leaders that we're watching, the emotions that they express are contagious. They influence us. There's been a lot of research on emotions and leadership and the importance of the emotions that we feel as a result of the people who are leading us. You can see in the US, for example, Dr. Fauci has had a tremendous influence. People gravitate to him and his style of influencing others and the emotions that he expresses. He's been kind of a grounding force among all the craziness that's been going on during this pandemic. So beware of that leaders have an influence on us and they influence our own emotions, our own leaders, and how we react to these kinds of crises. The other thing that's really important is that we face the reality of this. I've dealt with some people who say, it's nothing to worry about. It doesn't affect me. Well, that's not true. It is something to be concerned about. And on the other hand, there are people who just can't function because they're so worried about it. They see the world's coming to an end as a result of this. Well, neither of those are really what's going on. But we have to acknowledge that this is a long, drawn-out affair. People will get sick. People will die. People have been dying. It's painful for many people, for many families, for many first responders. People are being financially hit. We're probably all being financially hit to a large degree as a result of this. I think the important thing is that we have to face the reality of the situation that we're in. That's, number one, really, for us. The next thing is it's important for us to listen to the people around us. We have to listen to our kids and how they're feeling about this. We have to listen to our partner, extended family, friends. It's really an important time to hear other people's concerns and how they're coping and what they're doing. I find that to be really important. And in addition to that, we want to ask questions about how does it affect you, or what is it about the pandemic that gets you really anxious or nervous, or are there any positive things about this? So asking questions, this is leading to that concept of empathy that I was talking about. It does a number of things. One thing is it shows that you're paying attention to someone else, whether it's your kids or your parents or whoever. And it also is a way for you to find out what's really going on. We react quickly to our kids when we lose patience, but there may be more going on. There may be something that scares them. They may be afraid that they won't see their friends again. They may be afraid about what they're missing, from other people. So we have to listen to what it is that is really scaring them. And we do that by asking them questions, and asking the right questions to get a better sense of what's going on. And as I mentioned before, emotions are contagious. So as a parent, the way you feel about this influences your kids, whether you try and hide it or not. If you find it scary, your kids are going to sense that of being scared from you and your behaviors, both verbal and nonverbal. So it's important to keep that in mind, that you want to, display the kind of emotions that you want to see in your kids or your partner or the people around you. Really show you care. This is a time to show you care to those people who are around you. It's important. It is, it's amazing the increase in what I've been hearing in other involvements I've had in other agencies, increase in spouse abuse and some of those problems going on with the closeness and the inability for people to really deal with the situation in their households. So it's important, again, to step back and to just show that you care about the people around you. And just little things can matter in times like this. Putting the tube on the toothpaste can be a big deal. Closing the toilet seat. Like, you know, when we're under this kind of stress, everything counts. So it's really important to try, really, I know it's hard. I haven't find it hard myself to be nice to people, even when they bother you in these stressful times. Control, I mentioned control. How do we take control? Well, again, listening to what public health experts are telling us about the situation. Sneeze into your arm, social distancing, but not social isolation. We want to connect with people, but following the general advice of public health is a way of us taking control of our lives and our families' lives and our kids' lives to a certain extent. Communicate with supervisors, co-workers. If you're a working parent, this is really important. It's important that you explain your situation to your boss or to whoever at work, because you've got kids at home, you've got to manage the kids, manage the work. You may have to sporadically go between the two things, spend some time with your kids, then get some work done, spend more time with your kids. What I found some people are doing is focusing on their kids in the morning routines and getting them started and getting their day going, spend more time in the afternoon with work activities, taking phone calls, dealing with clients and those kinds of things. Make time for yourself. This is so important. And there are so many things you can do to look after yourself. And these are some of the suggestions I've gotten from people I've been dealing with. Everything from taking bubble baths to taking walks around the block, meditating. My wife, for example, takes online meditation courses quite regularly where they meet through Zoom. She also does yoga classes through Zoom. Our office is now offering yoga classes to all our employees through Zoom. Reading a good book. I've started reading some books that I travel a lot. I'm going all over the world with my work, but now I'm sitting at home. I have a chance to catch up on some books I wanted to read. You could also just zone out. There's nothing wrong with just staring out the window sometimes and just looking at what's out there. And for some, of course, playing on their computer games is helpful. Use your social support system. Connect with people. Check in with people. See how they're doing. It makes you feel better and it makes them feel better. Stay informed. You want to know what's going on with the pandemic. But again, we've got to be careful. We don't want to get over-informed. We want to keep up with what's going on, but there's nothing worse than overdosing on the news. Do not spend hours watching US cable networks because those will get you anxious. And beware of all the false news that's out there because there's a lot. There's an interesting study recently published by some psychologists who studied the after effects of these kinds of traumatic situations. And what they found is that they looked at after 9/11, they looked after the Boston bombing and a number of other of these situations. And they found that people who watched cable news for hours a day had more post-traumatic stress after the event. This was specifically in the Boston Marathon bombing than people who actually witnessed the bombing. So watching cable news can be worse for your mental health than actually being part of a negative event, of a crisis. Set boundaries. Now this is important. Dealing with your kids, you want to try, and again, this depends on the age of your kids, but trying to deal with work life and home life. If you can designate a special work area to do your work, maybe in a room that has a door that you can close off from the kids, designate an area for the kids to do their schoolwork or homework. If you don't have room for a home office, set up a children's workspace near you so that you can be right next to your child or children and they can actually see you working. You can model working behavior. Look, I'm doing some work here. Can you do some work too while I'm doing some work? Use a kitchen timer. Tell your child that, look, I'm going to spend the next, till this timer goes off, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, depending on the age of the child, I'm going to do my work, and then we'll get together when the timer goes off and we'll spend 15 minutes together playing a game. So working with a timer and your child to try and keep them busy while you get some work done and they get some work And at the end of it, at that time, thank your child for allowing you to do the work, for giving you the time, and enjoy, celebrate the fun that you've had. Try not to threaten things like loss of screen time and other things, because threatening them doesn't really work well in these kinds of situations. Sharing responsibilities is also another good tactic that we find. If you can pass childcare duties off with someone else, if there's another caretaker at home, a partner or someone else, an older child. Grandparents, this is the role that I play. My grandkids and I FaceTime almost every day. My granddaughter and I play castle. She's taken me inside the castle she's built, and I'm the frog and she's the princess. And, you know, we have all kinds of games that we play all through FaceTime, which is just an amazing technology. I'm so grateful that we have technology like that, that we can see our family members, my grandchildren, on a regular basis and play games with them, even though I can't be there with them right now. And of course, your kids can have virtual play dates with other kids. Again, boundaries, I want to just touch on this again. I found a lot of people talk about, this was really big in a webinar I did the other day. There's maybe negative people around you who just won't stop with all the bad news and telling you all this terrible stuff that's going on. Well, it's important not to get caught up in their worries or fears. And it's important to try and minimize your contact with those friends or family who are just giving negative vibes all the time. So what you do is you empathize with them, say, geez, it's really, I'm sorry you feel that way. It is bad. It's a bad situation. But you know what? I really want to take a break from that right now. I really don't want to pay attention to the news now. Maybe we'll talk about it later. You can also have what we call a do not disturb button, where you let them know somehow that this is not a good time to talk about that. Yeah, we will later on. This was really popular. The other day, there seem to be a lot of people who have these people in their lives and just don't know how to deal with them because they're close family members or friends. They don't want to alienate them. So you can maintain the relationship, but turn off the tap of the negative vibes. Prioritize healthy choices. So again, you want to eat properly. I know it's tempting to go for the ice cream and chips, but eat good food, get sleep. We need our sleep, physical activity, and try not to binge watch TV. It's great to watch the odd thing on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever your choice is, Crave TV, but try not to binge watch. I had all that exercise equipment in my basement that I hadn't used in a while. Well, guess what? This is the time to get back on it. And I become new friends with some of that old equipment that's been sitting in the basement. It's a good time to try and catch up on getting in shape or staying in shape. It's important to be realistic. You can't be perfectionistic at times like this. Your house isn't going to be as clean as you want it to be. Things aren't going to be perfect. Your kids aren't going to be well behaved. You've got to accept that. That's just the way things are going to be. And you have to practice forgiveness. You have to allow people to do the crazy things they might do at a time like this. Be good to yourself. Be compassionate. Say, hey, you know what? I'm going to just live with this for now. It's just a difficult time, and things will change once we get through this time. You're doing the best you can, and that's what you've got to do. Just stay with the best you can, and don't beat yourself up or have negative self-statements about yourself for having difficulties. And one of my favorites, reconnect with things you enjoy. Find something you loved as a kid, something you did before, and get back into it. For some people, it's been knitting or needlepoint, jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku. Obviously, for me, it's music. And what I'm finding now, which is amazing, is because of this pandemic, here's the sort of the challenge side of me. Because of this pandemic, some of the best musicians and bands in the world can't perform. They can't tour. They can't put on their concerts. So guess what? They are at home. That's an opportunity. So I've managed to contact some of the world's greatest sax players and take workshops with them. I just took a workshop the other day with Charlie Deschamps, who's the saxophone player for the rock group Hall & Oates. He's been with Hall & Oates for 20 years. He's become my friend. He's teaching me some things on the saxophone. I've also met Katja Rickenwalker. She's the sax player for Rod Stewart. She's in Los Angeles. She's at home not knowing what to do with herself. She's given me some lessons on things to do. There's a great opportunity if you want to play guitar or piano. There's a a website, I think it's called artistworks.com, where you can connect with artists on any instrument and get private lessons from some of the world's great musicians. So any number of things you can do during this time that you may not have had time to do before this happened. Look for ways to help, things you can do in the community, with your family, delivering food. There's so many things you can do or your family might be able to get involved with. Helping others is a great way to help yourself. See this event as a challenge. It's a time to learn. There's so many online courses you can take through Udemy and all kinds of different areas where you can learn new skills. Take the time to spend with your family and do things together, play games, enjoy being with family. Watch Netflix, see the odd film or things. I've seen some great documentaries and some great movies that I've had a chance to catch up on. And here's another one. This just came to me this week. Call someone that you haven't been in touch with for years. I had a phone call this week from a former classmate of mine from graduate school 45 years ago, over 40 years ago. Out of the blue, he called me up, a psychologist in California who's now retired. He said he's sitting at home with nothing to do. He started going through old books and old pictures, and he found pictures of us, of old classmates, and he decided to give us all a phone call to see how we're doing. It was such a great half hour where we reminisced and talked about the old times. He even sent me a picture of some of us during that time. Now, this is 40 years ago. I'm the one on the left. When we were in grad school 45 years ago. Great reminiscing, catching up. Call someone out of the blue that you haven't seen for many years. It's amazing. It makes you feel great. Be kind to yourself. Again, pay attention to the things you tell yourself and don't over criticize yourself. And finally, humor. We need a little bit of humor in our lives. This is a time with enough seriousness, enough bad news. Every once in a while, we need something that's going to help us and make us laugh. And there are things we can find that can help us with that. And I think with that, I'm going to be done my presentation part, and we have a little bit of time for questions. And because I haven't been able to see the Q&A, I'm going to let you handle the question part of the presentation. Whoops, I can't hear you. Sorry.
This is the second time that's happened to me, and I'm gonna laugh about it and not take it too seriously.
Now I hear you.
So I wanted to thank you, Dr. Stein, very much for walking us through what has been a very practical presentation. You've provided us with excellent tips on how to manage stress today, and and really practical ideas for managing stress throughout our lives. So really grateful, appreciate the time that you've taken. We do have time just for a couple of questions very quickly, and I will be sharing the questions with you afterwards, so perhaps we can get back to some of our attendees later. But a practical question just as far as how can we encourage a growth mindset in young people and children? Do you have some advice on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of advice on that. I mean, the first thing I would tell you to do is to read Carol Dweck's book, which is called Mindset, because it's filled with suggestions on how to do that. But just generally to promote people learning, be curious, inquisitive, ask questions. There's so many tactics you can use to promote mindfulness, and her book is a great resource for things you can do.
Great, thank you. And on that note, where would we be able to find your book, Hardiness?
So our Hardiness book is available everywhere. I think Amazon actually had run out, but you can try amazon.ca. I think it's still at Indigo chapters, and let me know if you have trouble finding it. I know it sold out pretty quickly. I mean, the timing, we did not plan to do this before a pandemic, believe me. It just happened to fall into place. So timing. It should be in some of those major retailers.
Okay, great. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I did just want to take a moment and just on behalf of the Psychology Foundation of Canada, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate all of what you've shared with us today. And I can see in the chat that people are very grateful, expressing their gratitude towards you. So thank you, Dr. Stein.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We really appreciate your participation in the webinars. I would encourage you to come back next Wednesday. We have Dr. Nazreen Khatri, who's joining us once again. And she will be sharing some more information on life interrupted. So really, how is it that we can support young people, young adults during this time, especially as some of those life milestones might be interrupted. So please consider joining us next Wednesday, and we will also continue to offer webinars throughout the next couple of months. If you have the opportunity, we'd encourage you to consider a donation. It'll allow us to continue to do this work. Please feel free to share all of this information with your communities, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Bye-bye.